Welcome to the Beyond Bound Coach and AD Professional Development Series, a weekly online professional development for athletic administrators and coaches. Join us as 6 former ADs now employed by Bound and with over 100 years of combined experience discuss topics important and beneficial to ADs and coaches. Join us on this journey of professional growth. We're here to help you take your coaching and athletic administration to the next level and beyond.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our March 15th, 2024 episode of Beyond Bound, our professional development series by ADs, for ADs and coaches. We hope that we can give you some tidbits, some tips, some tricks, some perspectives, maybe that'll make your life easier, or at least help you to maybe navigate your way through your world of leadership. This week's episode is inspired by Aaron Stecker's journey to the slopes. He had mentioned when he was out skiing, stop on your way down the mountain, take a look around. It's important to take those moments to see things that you're missing as you go through life. And I'm going to extend on that metaphor just a little bit this weekend. A few weeks ago, Tracy and I, my wife, went to Sedona. We did some hiking around the Sedona area, and as we were on the trails, I could hear this episode of trail mix forming in my head. And as I started to talk out loud to her, I said, you know what? There's an episode of Beyond Bound in this that I can help build on, maybe that Aaron started. And the scenery is so beautiful. Every few steps you take, there's a whole new view to take in. And and you see things in a whole new way. You haven't gone very far. You haven't shifted your spot on the ground, maybe 20, 30 feet, but when you look, it looks different. So how can we take that metaphor? How can we shape that into what we do in our everyday life? How can we move ourselves? So what we see, these are just some thoughts from the trail, little trail mix. What we see, what we perceive is important. And the way we perceive things is different. Each of us. So Tracy and I could be standing right next to each other, but because our eyes are shifted 2 or 3 inches one way or another, it looks different. We have a different perspective, and people's perspective becomes their reality. So what can we do? How can we go about seeing things as if we've never seen them before? Because we think we've dealt with the same situation, but how do we deal with it if we've never seen it before? How do we navigate it? When we were there, we had downloaded this app called All Trails. Great app. It helps you navigate along the path. If you veer off the path, it is a little blue line. There's a green line for the path of the trail, but your line is the blue line. So if you're not matched up with the green line, it tells you. But we don't have that in our everyday life. So how do we account for that? How do we navigate our own preconceptions? And sometimes, in some cases, our own misconceptions. So we're going to take that challenge a few steps further. We have to see the problem. Now, is this the problem, what you're looking at here, or is this the problem? Okay. Your perspective, your focus shifts. Even you can be standing in the same spot. What am I looking at? Have I turned my head one way or the other? So you have to see the problem. Now, how do you see the problem? Are you too close to the problem? Sometimes you need to take a step back to see it differently. Okay. And most of the time, almost all of the time, decisions that we make, things that we do, they're not about getting people to see things the way we see them. We have to do some things to help ourselves see things the way they see them. Okay. Get the panoramic picture. See the overall view. Okay. When you're looking at this, are you too close to the problem? Or can you see everything that's going on? Okay. You have to be able to see everything that's going on. And to do that, you have to change your viewpoint. The new perspectives are just a few steps away. And how do you gain those new perspectives? How do you get that in your everyday life? We're not just talking about being on the trail. How do we extend that metaphor? Talk to your coaches, okay? Visit with them, and not just about what they do in their jobs, not just about the game, not just about practice or just about the kids, but find out about the coaches. You have to understand not just what they do, but who they are. And it's a lot the same with parents. It's a lot harder to do that because you have a little more limited interaction with all of your parents, but talk to parents. When you're at the game and they come in, say hello, stop to them for 5-10 seconds. It's not a lot, but it does mean a lot to them after the game. I don't know about your gyms, but it takes an hour to clear out our gyms because people like to stay and hang out. It's what they do. They take that same selfie with their friends that they've taken after every game for 2 years, but they're still going to take it again. Most of all, most importantly, talk to your students. Talk to your players, talk to your athletes, talk to your student body. Get that shift in perspective. And it only takes a few steps, and you'll see something completely different. And then you can help start seeing the entire problem. Okay? You can get that overarching view, and you can see what's going on in that valley. And don't forget to look back. This is a view from behind, 180 degrees behind me from that mountain. Completely different perspective. Sometimes you need to look back. You need to look into the past to see how you did things or what happened, just to gain a perspective on what's coming and what's the new issue. And sometimes you need to have the courage to find another path. This is a completely different trail than the one we were on before, but it's a new path. It has new perspectives. It has new views. And sometimes the path you were on needs to be different than the path you need to be on in order to help me make a good decision. We need to constantly challenge our own perspectives and our own viewpoints in order to change how we do things. How we did them isn't always how we should do them. Now, last week, Aaron talked about the process of shaping his mission and his vision statement for the athletic program. And then Scott talked about that mission statement, that vision being a living and breathing document. Well, if it is truly a living and breathing document, then we need to constantly shift our positions and how we see it. In order to do that, we have to take those steps. We have to talk to people. We have to understand things. And we have to learn to look around. Okay? Look around not just to see, but to perceive. Because seeing and perceiving aren't always the same thing. And as I said, perception is someone's reality, and someone has a different perception of the same thing that you're seeing. All right, thoughts and discussions. On my screen, I had Brian first. You're up, buddy.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Once again, Joey, 2 quick things. Pictures are awesome. That looked like awesome hiking. Super jealous right now. So
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could imagine. It looked really cool. And that All Trails app, that thing is amazing, isn't it?
It is.
I was up in Colorado, this is years ago, but it was tracking me, and I wouldn't have thought I had any cell phone signal at all. And I was seeing exactly where I was at on this trail, and I was able to keep my way. But anyway, sorry, I digress. The few takeaways for me, because, as you're talking, I'm kind of forming or thinking through things that have happened in my past or things that I've observed happening within my athletic department or within my own team. And that idea of somebody's perception as reality is way too true. We get to see things from a different vantage point. And, you talk to parents, you talk to kids, you talked about doing both those things, and you get this perspective. You're like, holy cow, I had no idea that they were seeing things this way. This is a problem. And so when you talked about talking with your coaches, talking with your students, talking with your parents, I just want to reiterate how important that is. Sometimes we don't even know the perspective that's out there, that's being discussed, that is happening to your athletic department or to your team, and you don't even know it because you haven't talked to anybody else. And so I think that's a big key. One of the things that I highlighted in my notes here is just, and I always called it the 30,000 foot perspective. As an AD, we got a lot of that. And even as a head coach, you get a lot of that. You're seeing things from a much bigger vantage point. And then when you talk to an individual assistant coach or you talk to an individual parent, you get really zoomed in, and it's your job to try and get them to zoom out to see the greater good, to see the bigger picture. Oftentimes head coaches get very tunnel visioned and they get stuck on things. And it's, as an AD, I always felt that was my job to help them kind of take that view back out, talk to a few people. Here's some people that I've talked to. And then the last thing I want to share, and you're basically talking about it in your entire presentation, but be sure and tell your story. Because if you're not telling your story, somebody else is, right? So when you take time to talk to your coaches, be sure and talk about, this is who we are. You remember, this is what we've talked about. When you talk to student athletes, listen. I'm not saying try and change their perspective, but give them the other vantage point. When you talk to parents, same thing. That's not a scary thing. Young ADs are often scared of that type of idea. I don't think that's scary. Those people want what's best for their kids first, but for the athletic department as a whole, they just aren't seeing the whole perspective. And it's your job to tell that story. So awesome stuff again, Joey. I'm again super jealous of where you are at, and I want to be there right now. But I'll let the next guy go.
All right, I think Mark, you are up next.
Yeah, really enjoyed this. It makes you think. It makes me think back, like, did I always do that? Did I always get a different perspective? I think I tried, but I'm not sure I always did. I'm just going to share some advice that I got early in my career, and I've repeated it to many people. And when I became athletic director and assistant principal, I remember somebody saying to me, don't ever forget what it's like to be a teacher now that you're an administrator. And I bet I've said that to every administrator out there that I talk to, like, don't ever forget what it's like to be in front of that classroom. Don't ever forget what it's like to be working with those students. But I think you can take that further as an AD. Don't ever forget what it was like to be a coach. Don't ever forget what it was like to be a student. And if you can keep those things in your mind, you can gain that perspective sometimes when you don't have the ability to be around the students to talk to them. Maybe you're dealing with a situation, there's no students around to talk to, and you just kind of go, okay, what was it like being a student? What is it like being a student today? And keep looking through those eyes. And I think too often, back to the administrator standpoint, administrators sometimes change who they are when they become an administrator. You're still a teacher at heart, you should be. And so I think we have to keep that perspective of walking in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I should have had you narrate the slide that said, look behind you.
Yeah.
Don't forget to look back.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That was beautiful. Perfect. Yeah. Aaron.
Well, great stuff, Joey. As always, I love it when you start to talk, because you start here and the depth and the wisdom to what you talk about based on your experiences and where you start to go with things and what you make me think about. Whenever I hear you talk about these things, is just amazing. So I appreciate that. Interesting. I'm going to share something here with you, an experience that I had that I think fits into this. And I'll be honest with you, I've been okay with where we landed on this, and this is a long time ago, and I'll tell you that in a second. But there's been times I've still been uncomfortable about this because it created this gaining a different perspective and having the courage to take a different path on something way back in my first couple of years of being an AD created a lot of gray area. But I think it was a win in the long run. We had a young man that's probably, I don't know, in my first couple of years of being an AD. So I don't know, back to 08, 09, somewhere around there. And football season, had a young man that it was in this transition time between school and football practice. And anyway, a fight broke out amongst teammates downstairs in the football locker room. But it was also in that transition time, and the other administrators got involved. And when it was said and done, it was one of those things where if it would have been on the football field during practice, it would have been handled by the football coaches, and they would have gotten the bottom of it and really not, wouldn't involve the in-school stuff, right? But since it was in this transition time and other administrators got involved in it and all that stuff, there ended up being a suspension from school. Well, this was last week of the season. It's senior night week. And the suspension from school was going to include Friday. Young man's a senior. And the initial, admin team decision, and we had a long discussion on it, and we went both directions. But the original decision was, nope, suspended from school Friday, can't participate in the football game Friday night. That means you cannot participate in senior night activities on Friday night. And I'm hemming and hawing, losing sleep over this. And we just kept having a discussion. And I went through, I started talking to parents. I started talking to student athletes about, this isn't sitting right with me. And we just had some conversations. How do you guys feel about this? Because we need to have some discipline, some consequences, and some things like that for poor choices. But we also have to be empathetic to bigger picture situations, right? And those conversations opened up my perspective enough on this to go back to the admin team and say, we got to figure something out about senior night here. And I know it's gray area. I know that in the moment you open this up and start to make any types of exceptions to what your normal operating procedures would be, you risk opening up that gray area, and how is everybody going to try to utilize that and take advantage of that down the road. But we talked and felt that senior night experience, not playing the game, but the senior night experience for the parents and the kids was a culminating thing. It was important that this young man be able to be a part of that. So we made the decision that they could give us a call when they got to the gate. We would come escort them from the gate down to the track. They could do senior night, and we would escort them out. The feedback we got from parents and the senior class on that, in terms of being willing to have a little bit of flexibility in that moment to let that happen for that senior family and for that senior student athlete, even though they couldn't play in the game, the last game of the year, at least get to be a part of that, change the relationship and dynamic between the admin team and parents, and the admin team and coaches in a positive way. Now, like I said, it led to a lot of, well, remember back when with this student athlete, and so it led us to have to take every situation, case by case, versus having this easy blanket, nope, you don't get to do it. But by gaining the perspective of others, it led us to probably a more empathetic policy and procedure and way of doing things. I felt like that fit in here as I was hearing you talk about that, I don't know, because it took some courage to go the other direction on that and say, no, we're going to do it differently than we've done it before. And it opened up a lot of, like I said, wiggle room. So it's important that we do that. And I think it leads to better relationships and better ways of doing things if you take the time to do it.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I agree. There's a lot to be said for having a policy and following your policy, but everything's not black and white. Most of the stuff that you do as an administrator is in the gray area. We live in the gray area, not in the black and white. I mean, that's just the way it is. And you're right. When you can take that perspective and show a little bit of flexibility and compassion, it goes a long way, because that builds a lot of trust with other people, that you're not just saying no because that's the way the rule says. You gain some trust in the decisions that you make are equitable.
Yeah, and this whole process of reflection part you were talking about today lends into that. That's what builds relationships. When you're having those, how many times we talked about that in Beyond Bound, and every other conversation we have is leadership's about relationships. And taking the time to talk to your parents, talk to your coaches, talk to your kids, and see things through their lens, as you're talking about today, Joey, leads to stronger relationships and leads to better decision making, because you're leading with your heart and empathy rather than just your viewpoint on things, and the way we've always done things before. So good stuff. I have to admit, I need to rewatch this so I see the pictures. I was writing so many things down when you were talking. I didn't even really see the pictures you had. So I'll have to rewatch this just to watch the scenery.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, thanks everyone. We appreciate you tuning in. We hope this is a great way to start your day or end your day, depending on when you view it. And we'll be back next week for another episode of Beyond Bound. Have a great week.